Hello, everyone. Patrick Clark here, joined by Brian Friend, B.Friendly Fitness. How are you feeling, Brian?
Pretty good. I mean, it's a tight turnaround, well, week one to week two, but I got some good sleep on Monday night and super productive Tuesday. Heading out to Pasadena Wednesday. Very encouraged by week one overall and excited to do it again.
Yeah, I did not get much sleep. I didn't get until 3 a.m. in the morning and then had to turn around and right back to work. So I'm still catching up. But regardless, we're here. We're back on the road. Like you said, you're heading out tomorrow, which will be actually today when this goes out, and I'll be going out on Thursday. But before we start looking ahead to Pasadena, let's recap Orlando a little bit. How's that sound, Brian?
Absolutely, a lot of good, a lot, some confusing maybe, and
Uh-huh.
plenty to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I think one of the bigger topics are the athletes that aren't going to the games. So let's start off with Brooke Wells. Any thoughts on Brooke Wells?
Yeah, I think it was not necessarily clear how bad of an injury she had from the conversations I've had. It seemed like, the foot was certainly bothering her. And I think, given what I've heard and what I saw from her, that she put a really gritty performance together. I mean, I think she probably could have snatched a little heavier and ran a little faster on 4 and 5 if she was fully healthy, but they were still impressive performances given the circumstances, and she had no quit in her. She showed up on Sunday, put out a good performance on 6. I think she managed that workout well, and a really strong performance on 7. I think it might have finished third or fourth overall, even after the top heat went, and she wasn't that many points out of making it. And if you
Yeah.
look back at the entire weekend, it seemed like that, whatever happened to her in the middle of Linda or towards the end of Linda there with the bench press and the multiple failed reps in the same round, at the end of the day is probably the points that she needed to get through despite not being at 100%. And the fact that she was that close, even though it was a less than optimal weekend on maybe a couple different fronts, is a testament, maybe not to her fitness, we know how fit she can be, but just to the grit and the passion she has for this sport.
We're almost seeing like a evolution of the type of athlete she is. I mean, yeah, she didn't make it to the games, but like you said, you pointed out, the grit, the performance, her coming back. It seems like the last couple of years, especially in the semifinals, that's kind of been her calling card. Just like, you know, down and just coming back. And last year, obviously, she had to come back to punch her ticket. Almost didn't make the games. And this year, I mean, her that final day, she gave a crack at it.
And I
Another
mean,
athlete. Yeah,
well, it's
go
just
ahead.
it's the nature of this season. When you
Uh-huh.
have one weekend to get to the games, there's nothing guaranteed. And we had a chance to hear Noah Olson speak about that. He's
Yeah.
been doing this for over a decade, and now he has qualified for 10 straight CrossFit Games. But he said, I came in here, and even throughout the weekend, I was as nervous as I've ever been, and I could feel the
Mhm.
tension and the anxiety. And this is it's not an easy sport. No one's got a guaranteed spot. No matter what you've done in the past, everyone has to show up and earn it.
Yeah. Another athlete, and unfortunately coming from the proving camp that didn't even get to finish her weekend was Saxon Panchek. Your thoughts on Saxon?
Yeah, I mean we've seen Saxon be great at this stage of competition and have some extremely high level performances at the games, both in individual tests and obviously finishing sixth a couple years ago there. It's a bummer anytime that there's an athlete like that that's not able to compete at 100%. And obviously it was even worse than Brooke to the point where he had to withdraw from the competition halfway through, or maybe even less than halfway through. And I guess what we've learned in recent years is you can take a year off and still come back and be relevant in this sport. And
Yes.
sometimes that actually works out for the best. So I think that if I was talking to Saxon, I would say, you know, take the time with your family, let the foot recover, and it's okay to have like a couple light months, maybe work with your brother if you can, help him try to
Uh-huh.
have a great performance at the games. Both his brothers, I think, will be going. Scott in the Masters division, and be supportive in that regard. Same thing for Brooke. Obviously, Sydney's made it, and you can still be an asset in their corner. And then when you get back into the training next year, maybe it's nice for the body to have a little time off. Saxon competes hard many times a year. He's usually top 20, which means he gets to go to Rogue. He may not go this year. Maybe he'll have to go through the online qualifier. But a couple months outside of competition and then getting back into the swing of it, when the season picks up next year, and maybe we end up seeing a return to the form that he was a couple years ago as a result of it. Sometimes the night is darkest before the dawn. So maybe this is just a rough patch for him, and sure, it's hard right now, but he's still young enough to come back and be great once again.
Yeah, no doubt that's going to happen. You brought up Sydney. We have, I believe, on the women's side, three potential games rookies with Caroline Stanley,
Shelby Neal,
Sydney, and Shelby Neal. So, I mean, which one of their performances kind of stood out to you?
I think that if you'd asked me before the weekend, which one of these three do I think is most likely to make it, I probably would have picked Shelby. I know she's a little bit lesser known. Obviously, Sydney's well known because of her sister, and we've seen Sydney have great performances in the past, and we know very much so that there are have been some limitations that just basically precluded her from having a chance, and she still has some holes in her game. I would probably say Sydney Wells, though. I mean, Caroline Stanley and Shelby Neal have been battling in this sport for a little longer and have maybe been knocking on the door. Sydney's made big strides every year, and while she still clearly has some things to work with, I mean, she had 2 bottom half finishes and one that was basically a last place finish. But she has that home run potential, and when you think about being able to balance out some bad performances and still fight your way through a fairly competitive field to get to the games, I knew she could be close, but I didn't. 7th place finish is great. She was kind of
impressive.
Not in the points aspect, but in terms of the placement, she was well within the cut line there, and very impressed with her. And the games will give her challenges. Like, there'll be workouts that'll be super tough for her, but there'll also be workouts that she'll be able to fight and put up some top scores from some early heats that might still hold up. I'm actually really curious to see how her Test 5 score of 309 ends up faring once all the semifinals are said and done. I think if it's not the best score in the world, it could still potentially be a top 3 after everyone gets a chance to get after it.
Yeah, I think one of the cool facts that came out of those 3 athletes is Caroline and Sydney both being former collegiate athletes at a high level. Sydney being an 800, 400 meter runner at the University of Missouri, and then Caroline played Division I softball. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And then Shelby's an athlete, on her own. She was someone that actually went through like the Marine ROTC program. So I think some of that might have helped them along the way in terms of their athletic ability.
Absolutely. And, I remember talking to Pat Vellner at Wadapalooza. They had a, jumping and running workout basically, and he and Brett Fikowski did great on it. And I asked him afterwards, and he's like, well, we played sports. We're athletes. We're athletic. And a lot of these guys are out here. They're younger than us, but they don't have that athletic background. And so to see a few women who, pursued a sport throughout their college years and then parlayed their athletic ability into, training for CrossFit for a couple of seasons and make the games, speaks to the value of doing that. And, I talked about it earlier this year that, one of the top teenage athletes in the male side right now, Ty Jenkins, also plays 2 sports in high school. And I love that. And I think that more up-and-coming CrossFitters can gain a lot by continuing to participate in the sports outside of the gym and actually probably make them better at CrossFit in the long run, too.
You know who would agree with that, right?
I think a lot of people would.
Well, I mean, Mr. Rich Froning would definitely agree with that. I think he actually told us that when we were down at Cookeville for the athlete camp.
Yeah, and Ben Bergeron made a video years and years ago, the 2030 Games champion. You can look it up on YouTube, and he says, I'll introduce him to CrossFit, but I still want him playing sports throughout their teenage years.
Yeah. Let's transition over to the men's side. We're having 3 men, rookies, that are going to, they're going to make their debut at the games. Which one of the 3 men that are puncher ticket Madison are you most impressive over the weekend?
This is a tough call. So they are Luke Parker, James Sprague, and Jack Farlow, and I quite honestly, all 3 of them surprised me in their own regard. I would say in totality, Luke Parker outperformed what I expected from him by a long shot, and that's just based on what I've seen in live competition from him before. But I think Luke's one of those guys that when the skills go up, when the weights go up, and and he's a decent runner, that the high level programming that Adrian has started to introduce at the earlier parts of the season is beneficial for him, and that showed this weekend. You still have to go out there and do it though, and I know that no matter who you are, when you haven't had the performances that you've wanted in the past, that there's always that doubt in the mind. So, Luke impressed me from beginning to end. James Sprague and Jack Farlow are a little bit different because we know that they're elite at certain things. But could they offset those things when the challenge was high? I mean, the snatch was a big concern for me for Sprague, and I don't think he hit the number he wanted to hit. I think he was hoping a PR actually, but 265 when your lifetime best is 272 is pretty damn impressive in that environment, and it kept him relevant. And then in the test 6, he spoke about it after the fact that he was really nervous for that workout in particular. And he was in a heat with some guys who absolutely smashed that, but he didn't get caught up in their own race, and you absolutely cannot do that in that workout. He managed himself through the gymnastics, and he needed that 24th place finish. Even though it looks like 24th isn't that great for him, that was a really high level of execution. And I think Jack very similarly. I think training with Emma has been a big plus for him. And he's rounded out his game compared to what we saw at Rogue, where he had a couple highs with a bunch of lows, and this was a little bit more steady performance. None of them really, like on the last workout, they were just like steady as she goes and took care of business, and I'm excited for all three of them.
Yeah. Which one of those three do you think might have the biggest impact at the games?
The big setback?
The biggest impact.
Oh, the biggest impact. Yeah, I mean, I think that in particular events, you'll see each one of them, have a top 10 finish here or there. Overall, I'm really curious about Parker. If it's true that the higher the skill, the higher the weight, and the more running there is, and I think he's a decent swimmer too, and he does have experience at the games on the team division. He's 5th place there last year with Independence. We've seen a lot of people go to the games on a team, have some level of success there, and then transition and be able to make it to an individual games when they haven't in the past. So I wouldn't have said that probably prior to this weekend, but having watched him and reflected on it a little bit, I think that Luke Parker's got my attention in terms of maybe making a big impact in the overall scheme of things once everything's said and done in Madison.
Yeah, we talked about the women, the men. Let's talk about the teams now. I'm sure there's a bunch of storylines there, but which ones kind of stood out from this past weekend from the team race?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken a little bit about the Grit House, and that I think they'll be better when the games come around. I feel the same way about the Mayhem Independence team and Krypton, and when you have kind of newer formed teams like those that still have a lot of they're new as a team, but they're not new to CrossFit. All those athletes have a lot of experience. That I think that the higher level at the games that demands more teamwork, demands more attention to detail, will bode well for them. But just like to talk about some teams that maybe haven't gotten as much attention, I was pretty high on the training think tank team coming in, and they didn't necessarily live up to the expectations I thought relative to this field. I thought they might be in the 5-6 range. I think they finished about 8th, but those teams always do well. And in terms of like the high level of coaching for teams in this sport, I think training think tank can throw their name in the ring with the Invictuses and the Oslos. Maybe they don't have the 3 and 4 teams competing there. They did have 2, but they get the most out of their teams, and I think that they deserve some credit for that.
I was really surprised by Move Fast Lift Heavy. I mean, obviously, they came in, and at one point they were going toe to toe with Proven. I think they had 3 runner-up finishes in the first 3 events. Really impressed with them. I'm really interested to see what they do at the games. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I would have said that it was unlikely that they'd make the top 10 before the weekend based on what I saw at the Crash Crescendo the month previous. But after watching them this weekend, I think the team competition globally is very, very tough. There are, 10 to 15 teams that are pretty good. And I think that especially when we get to Europe, we'll see some new teams over there that are going to be contenders. But Move Fast Lift Heavy is in the conversation for a top 10 games finish. Absolutely. After what we just saw.
I think actually the biggest story coming out of the team division was that other Mayhem team. Let's talk about that other Mayhem team, and how do you think they will do at the games?
Yeah, they were kind of, definitely off the radar last year prior to semifinals, and they did make it to the games, but every workout when they went out there, I was like, well, come on, eventually they're going to fall off. And they didn't. And they had a mid-tier finish at the games. I think they were 23rd, which is okay. and they brought back the same roster. And the experience does play in the team competition. It's always kind of the debate: if you rather have a new team of talented individuals, or rather have a solid team of people who know each other, understand each other, and can pick each other up when they need to. Because that's there's always going to be an element of that. I didn't even have them really close to a qualifying spot, and they finished on the podium. So relative to expectation, I'd say they had the best weekend of any team. For me personally, and I'll be curious to see how much, if any, they can improve on that 23rd place from last year. But based on what we saw, I think there's no reason not to think that they will improve their finish relative to the field at the games this year.
Well, hopefully they bring that crowd with them to Madison. They were definitely feeding off that crowd, and it was quite a sight to see. I mean, a lot of pride in their gym, their affiliate, and proud in being a Mayhem team representing their community. So that was pretty impressive. So let's transition a little bit. Let's do a little bit of previewing, just your thoughts heading into the West. What are you looking for in general heading into the West semifinal?
Yeah, I think that the two fields, the men's and women's fields, are a little bit different here, where you got a really top-heavy men's field. And I think there's a dozen men that I'm excited to watch compete, and some really specific workouts that I think guys can really knock some out of the park on. But I think I'm kind of any athlete, of all the athletes in the field, I'm really curious about Brent Fikowski and Sam Quant. Fikowski did not have the season that he wanted last year, and he's thrown into a semifinal with Pat Vellner, who he's never competed at semifinal regional competition before, and Justin Medeiros, the two-time champ. So he's got the arguably the two guys that he'd want to be measuring himself against right here in a semifinal. So there's test one, for example, is something he's going to be great at regardless. But I want to see how he holds his own against some of the best in the world on some of these other tests that might not be perfect for him. He's the master of maximizing his potential in those things. So I'm going to be watching. And then Sam Quant's had an up and down career, and he had obviously a great season last year, but he's really yet to string together two great seasons in a row. So there's no reason on paper that he shouldn't be in contention for a podium spot here and solid across all the tests like he was last year at the Granite Games. But he's got to prove to us still that he can do it year in and year out.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I think it's probably nice if we kind of recap this. Recapping the Africa semifinal and your thoughts coming out of Africa.
Yeah, right. There were two semifinals last week. There'll be three this week, and they don't get maybe as much attention because they don't have as many spots, and there's a little different quality of live stream. And we live in a part of the world where sometimes they're competing while we're sleeping. But I say two of the three favorites won over there. It was tight on the women's side, and honestly, there were a couple of women there that came a little bit out of nowhere in Gilmarie and Mariska, and made it really tight. Christina was in it, and then Michelle ends up winning. And the Mayhem team, they looked pretty solid against their competition. I think the story is really Jason Smith. He's 39 years old. He wasn't even the top 50 in his Masters division, but he's still I know he didn't win last year, but he's still holding the mantle once again in Africa. And I think it's fair to say he'll be the oldest guy in the games field once again, and he's pushing the barrier there in terms of what's possible on the men's side. I'm curious to see how he does at the games. He's had some success there in the past, and even though Africa is perceived to not be very strong, and a majority of the athletes that they send to the games don't do that well against the global games field. He has been 10th. He's been 27th, I think, when he was there 2 years ago. And I'm curious to see if he can, I think even if he's able to crack the top 30, we don't know what the cut situation, if any, will be. But if he avoids finishing in the bottom 10 at 39 years old, I mean, that would be, I think, as impressive as any performance we'll see at the games. So hopefully he shows up strong. And, congratulations to him. I mean, it's hell of an accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to this weekend. I know CrossFit, they're making some changes from, I guess, lessons learned from week one, carrying over to week two. Do you know any information on that, or have any information you want to share regarding that?
Yes, some. I don't know necessarily all the details, but it's kind of gotten out at this point that they're reconfiguring the fields of play. So I think all of the action will be in the same arena, but the actual field of play might look a little different event to event. I'm not entirely sure of all the reasons why they've made that change, but I think it might be to accommodate the people on site who want to see, because at the in Orlando they had that upstairs balcony where you could still line the windows and get some view down, but other than that there wasn't as much seating on the secondary as the first field of play. So maybe it's just to make sure everyone on site can get in there and see the live action, which great change if they do that. And then as far as the events that aren't being streamed, I think that there's the intent to try to do something very similar to what we were able to do last week in terms of the CrossFit Games podcast. And it's not the same quality of coverage, but it is coverage where you can follow along and have some recognizable names and faces share with the population or the community at home of what's going on for test 1 and 3 for the individuals and test 3 for the teams.
Well, I certainly can't wait. The crowds, they came back. It was a nearly packed house in Orlando. I'm expecting the same in Pasadena. But Brian, once again, nice shirt. This time we're not matching.
I put it on and I was like, I bet he's wearing the blue.
No. I'm actually wearing our semifinal shirts, which are now available on our website. So go ahead, go to the online store as well and see our newest drop from the semifinal collection. We also have the core collection on there as well. Click on the link in our bio to check it out. Also, if you want to keep on continuing seeing videos like this with me and Brian, and support future projects, please consider becoming a Patreon on our exclusive Patreon page. That link is also in our bio. And as always, like, follow, subscribe to get alerts on all new videos on this channel. Brian, you have anything to say to get us out of here?
Just if you're on the road and you see us at semifinals, don't hesitate to stop us and say hi. We love the support. We love to interact with you guys. So appreciate everything you've done already, and looking forward to maybe meeting some of you guys in California.
Yeah. Oh, we will have merch. We'll have a setup in Orlando, or I'm sorry, not Orlando, in Pasadena. Just look for us at the RX Smart Gear booth right when you walk in. Look for the Sherpa Works area, the OG tent, and we'll have some merch there for sale. So, as always, be friendly, our friends.